Right on time. Good evening. Call to order the meeting of the Clayton Planning Board for Monday, July 27th. And I will ask Mr. Conrad Almeida if he would do a roll call for us this evening.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to start with Chair Dupree.
Here.
Vice Chair Applewhite.
Here.
Board Member Gleason.
Here.
Board Member Saraski.
Here.
Board Member Bland.
Here.
Board Member Carter.
Here.
Board Member Hooker. Here. Board Member Hall.
Here.
Board Member McCurney. And it looks like we do have Board Member alternate, Board Member Durham. Thank you, sir. We do have a quorum, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. Before we get started this evening, let's stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Has everyone had an opportunity to look at the agenda this evening? Are there any adjustments to the agenda tonight?
No adjustments to the agenda, sir. Thank you.
No adjustments. Will someone make a motion to accept the agenda?
Move that we accept the agenda as is.
All right, we have a motion to accept the agenda as it is. We have a second. Have a second from Ms. Bland. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. And I trust that you've had an opportunity to take a look at the minutes from our previous meeting in June. Do we have any changes to those meetings, or do we accept them as they are?
Move to approve.
Move to approve. Second. Member Saraski, we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. This is the best kind of meeting. It's a lot of us sitting and listening tonight. There are no items scheduled for the planning board to hold a public meeting tonight, so we're going to move on to item 5, which is a presentation by Abby Napier, planning intern, on their summer internship experience. I'm looking forward to hearing this from Abby.
Good evening, board. My name is Abby Napier. I'm the summer intern for the planning department. Yes, of course. Is that better? Thank you. I've been here since the beginning of June. I'm unfortunately leaving in a few weeks, but this makes a great opportunity for me to share what I've done so far, since this is nearing the end of my internship. So for this presentation, I'll give a little overview of who I am, my studies, as well as my interest in local government. I'll then give a brief overview of the larger projects I've been working on the whole summer, and then as well as some of the shorter tasks that I've been assigned. I'm from Hickory, North Carolina. It's where I was raised. It was really great for me to be able to watch the town grow from kind of nothing to what it has become now. I think that kind of sparked my interest in planning and learning how local governments grow and build to become a place where people like to be. I did my undergraduate degree at UNC Greensboro in political science, and now I'm working on my Master's of Public Administration at UNC Chapel Hill with a concentration in local government, and I'll be starting my second year in the fall. I'm really interested in planning, that's why I'm here, as well as budget and management. My position, or my program, has a lot of opportunities for me to learn about budget, not so much planning. So this was a really great opportunity for me to kind of just dive right into what local government planning is, and then able to take that back into my studies and figure out what I want to do from there. I know in my future, I want to work in North Carolina. It's where I was born and raised, and I love it. And I picked Clayton because this is exactly the size town that I want to work in. I love the growth that happens here, but also the preservation of the small town charm. I think that's really valuable part of North Carolina, so that's definitely where I want to stay and continue working. Throughout the summer, the main thing I've been working on is the town strategic plan. I've been working with Emily and Dolores to understand the plan, as well as ClearGov, the software that we use to monitor progress to the plan. I did staff surveys as well as some director interviews to get feedback on what the planning department can do better for the future. And then I drafted some future tasks and tactics for Conrad to use going forward as based on the recommendations from the staff and directors. And then I also helped compile or shorten what the goals are for this year as well. The longest thing I've been working on is the records keeping in the basement. This is before, technically it's a little more than before. All those boxes were stacked up on top of the shelves when I first got here. But Devin so graciously put them on the ground for me, so I was very grateful for that. And then this is what it looks like now. I logged and disposed of 40-ish boxes with the town clerk, and then now I'm working on digitization and organizing of those, the permanent files. I'm about 200-ish files in so far. We're just doing recommendation plats and exempt plats, but that is definitely an ongoing process. And then the last longer project I've been working on is translating some of the older standard operating procedures to the new template, just for some uniformity. Some of them looked like this one. Others had very different formats and templates before, so it's nice that they can all now eventually be the same format. I also organized and compiled or added to the master list that existed, so we have a better record of all the SOPs, as well as helping identify some spaces where we could have new ones. And then these are the 3 shorter assignments I worked on. I've been doing some UDO amendment research for the planners as well as the director. That included some research on shipping containers in different municipalities, definition of animal processing, chicken coops in the ETJ, as well as size limits for commercial accessory structures. I helped the planners with the development map, kind of providing a fresh eyes on that and seeing what it could look like if there are any adjustments that could be made to the format of it. And then I also helped with just making regular updates to the development map. And then, of course, I did ride-alongs with code enforcement as well as planning inspections, and then a ride-along with Conrad to just give a future view of what Clayton will eventually look like, which was really helpful for me. And that is all I have. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
How did you enjoy the glamorous activity of organizing the basement?
I actually didn't mind it. It was a fun, like, casual activity. I just put on music downstairs and I was in the room by myself. So it was heavy. I had to dress differently when I was doing that. I got very dusty, but it wasn't really bad at all. I kind of liked the casual activity for the day.
Good, good. Anybody have any questions of Abby? Comment? Thank you very much. You have something?
Yeah, just one comment. I'm glad you're able to enjoy your time here in Clayton, and after your second year, we hope that you can find your way back to Clayton, and if not here, continue to stay in local government. There's a huge need for folks that are interested and excited to work in local government across North Carolina. So wherever you end up, I'm sure you'll do very well.
Oh,
so thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Abby. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. I neglected to say we're very honored tonight to have the members of the Clayton Town Council come to the planning board meeting. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we're happy to have y'all here and be a part of it this evening. All right, we're moving on to item 5B, and that is a presentation by Joe Stallings, the Economic Development Director for the State of the Economy. So, Mr. Stallings, if you would come forward, please.
Okay, great. Good afternoon or good evening, board. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. I'm going to be presenting a little bit about economic development and our role here in the town, but a lot of this presentation really comes from the State of Economic Development event that was held back in June. It's held as a partnership between the Clayton Chamber of Commerce and my department, where we bring in, this year we brought in site selectors and developers as well as the general public to help them understand a little bit about what's going on here locally, but also greater trends in economic development and how that is actually impacting our community as we look at how Clayton will grow into the future. So the first few couple of slides are really about background. So you think table setting before we get into really about what economic development is and how we're going about our day-to-day work, and then a little bit about some of the initiatives that we're taking involvement in. But I would say this: if there's any questions along the way, please stop. Don't hesitate to correct me if you see something that's that you want to discuss or have any questions. And I hope today that whenever you leave, you'll feel really energized about our future, where we're headed, but also better informed about how our department, the Economic Development Department, works with other various departments and outside agencies to help bring about the vision that the Town of Clayton Council has set for the future of our community. So with that, we'll just jump right in. This is a slide really that talks about the population growth. I know you all probably know just as well as anybody, the amount of people coming to the town of Clayton is impressive. As a matter of fact, we add about, on average, 5 people every single day, right? And oftentimes when I give this presentation, I talk about imagine that on the clock, right? 5 a.m., a new person, 10 a.m., 3 p.m., 8, and before the clock strikes midnight, there's another person coming to the town of Clayton as a citizen or a resident, right? If you put all these people in your backyard would quickly fill up. And so that actually impacts a lot more than just how many people live in town. And the unique thing about those people is that those that are coming in are very young, or young comparatively speaking to our neighbors. Here on this slide, you can see a little bit of a visual representation of the average age of populations of communities around us. The town of Clayton has one of the youngest populations by average age compared to our neighbors, and that really helps inform how we spend our money. What's important to someone in their early 20s or 30s, especially if they do or don't have children yet, may be uniquely different than those who are aging in place, right? And so we as service providers must keep that in mind as we do things like budgeting and service delivery. This is a common sight to see, right? This isn't uncommon to Clayton in any way, but with all those new people coming to town, we're seeing congestion be a greater issue here locally. But it was an issue for years and years. Last year, there was an article released by WRAL in coordination with the Johnson County Economic Development Office that brought to light about over 70% of our population leaves for work every single day, right? That impacts things like roads and congestion, but it also means that those are dollars that are traveling outside of our community, and they're spending those dollars, say, on lunch or gasoline or going to the grocery store before they come home from work, somewhere else where they could be spending it right here in town had they the opportunity to have employment closer to them, right? So if there's a job closer into Clayton, we hope that our citizens would take advantage of that job versus going out to, say, Durham, RTP, Raleigh, et cetera. So all that comes down to this a little bit, in no small way, is that the growth impacts more than just population. So we know we have a lot of new residents. We know that those residents on average are younger than most other residents in neighboring communities. We know that we're seeing higher congestions and that we're seeing a large portion of those residents going out and getting employment elsewhere outside of the town. But what does it really mean? Well, it means a lot more than just the population increase in and of itself, because population determines a lot more than just congestion. They determine things like how many members of the House of Representatives you have in the U.S. Congress, who your representative is in the North Carolina House and Senate. It also impacts your ability to get things like grants. So we're in a Tier 3 community here in Johnston County. That limits my office's ability to access grants on the state level because we're considered one of the more affluent counties in the state. And so on this map, it really helps kind of illustrate the fact that you're seeing growth. In our instance, we're seeing exponential growth in just a handful of counties. About 10% of the state's counties are seeing 50% or more, but there are a lot more counties that aren't seeing any growth. As a matter of fact, declining populations across the state have been an issue for years, and this helps illustrate that. But what it also does, I hope in no small part, is help make sense of the current political environment, right, that we see the state of North Carolina in. right? So rural versus urban, who gets what, and when, and where. Those things are still playing out, and it impacts our day-to-day operations, right? So we talked about grants, we talked about how it impacts election districts, and so population growth is a wonderful thing in a lot of ways, but it doesn't come without its challenges. So let's talk about a little about the town's tax base, and this is something that my department is really focused on every single day, is how to address this imbalance. And so you can see here on the screen, our tax base roughly is made up about 80% residential versus 20% non-residential. And the vast majority of that non-residential is commercial. So you think retail, office, medical providers and the like. Industrial is, like you would imagine, those people that make things or warehouse, distribute things. And so the reason why that matters is because it impacts our tax rates pretty significantly. So this is a graphic that came directly out of the Cost of Community Services survey that was recently conducted by Johnston County. And in their review of the county's tax base, they saw that on the whole, it costs about 23 cents to serve industrial or commercial unit. So if you think of building or the like, based on the dollar of revenue. So every dollar that is sent out, essentially, they're making about, let's call it 77 cents for every dollar on a commercial. On agriculture, they're making about 19 cents on every dollar. And then in residential, they're having to pay the dollar plus 43 cents additional to service that same residential unit. Long story short, I think that the Cliff Notes version is residential in and of itself doesn't pay for itself. It consumes more services than the amount of taxes that it generates, right? So there's a lot to be said about this. It's not necessarily perfect science, but what I hope folks will take away from this is the importance of having a balanced tax base so that the cost burden of government does not fall squarely or solely on the shoulders of residents, right, our tax-paying citizens, but rather are shared amongst a variety of different uses, including industrial, commercial, agriculture, and the like, so that we have a more even tax burden spread across the tax base. And so our Cost of Community Services study has been let. We are working with our contractor now. We're hopeful to get that back sometime fall, winter of this year, hopefully by no later than Q1 of next year, to begin looking at, okay, what does the town of Clayton's Cost of Community Services look like? And I know this was brought up during the State of Economic Development. It does not mean that we shouldn't have any more houses. Right? People need a place to live, right? And frankly, the state legislature doesn't allow us to just completely deny people from building a home, right? There's a lot of regulations around development procedures, but what it does mean is that whenever we're bringing a project before you all, or the town council is deliberating on a particular project, hopefully they'll be better informed how that project might actually impact the bottom line of the town. What does it look like in the long term and in the general? Doesn't mean that it should be approved or denied, but rather how can we better inform ourselves and avail ourselves of the information so that we can make more informed decisions going forward. This is some information taken by CoStar, which is a thing about it, like an MLS service for commercial real estate. And what I would like for you all to take out of this is that we have opportunities for improvement when it comes down to building and site offerings. Essentially saying, if you look at, let's take industrial flex, that's a great example. So in the industrial flex, we have about 259,000 square feet of flex. We have no vacancy, which means that if you are someone who would be pursuing a space in an industrial flex building, you will not find any space to occupy here in the town of Clayton. Right? That's an issue for us whenever we're trying to help companies, whether they're small plumbers, HVAC technicians, or someone who's in a more high-tech industry that needs that access to flex space. We have no space to offer them. It also helps bring about some idea of how we sit within the county itself. So out of the retail market, we're about 20% of the retail market is right here in Clayton versus elsewhere throughout Johnston County. So you're looking at total square footage, the amount of square footage under construction, vacancy rates, and then of course your market release rates. The great news about where we're headed is that the town of Clayton has done a wonderful job in beginning and putting together strategic plans to help us with our day-to-day activities to ensure we're on a correct path moving forward. So here you can see a variety of them. That's the town of Clayton's strategic plan, as well as the comprehensive growth plan, the economic development strategic plan, the downtown plan, and there's many others that are all guiding documents that help us ensure that we're moving in the right direction together. Not independently of one another, but ensuring that our plans are aligned and that we're moving together. So on the economic development front, this is a little bit about what we do. And this triple helix thing has been around since I was in the business. And long story short, what we're trying to do is thread the needle between government, business, and education to ensure that we're all kind of moving in the same direction and helping businesses get access to the resources they need to be successful. But in our department in particular, we're responsible for marketing, business recruitment, business retention and expansion, legislative affairs, and of course, site identification and preparation. So with all that residential growth, what we have seen is there are some instances where sites that would have been more suited for, say, industrial or commercial development has been taken up by a residential developer, right? So whenever we talk about residential not paying for itself, what we're seeing is when we lose a site like that, then it kind of compounds the problem, right? And so the site identification preparation piece of it's really important for us to get out and begin trying to secure those opportunities around the community and keep them to where they are ready for industrial or commercial development. So here are a few council priorities for the department. The number one thing is, as we've discussed, the tax base piece. So making sure we're balancing that tax base, increasing those job opportunities, trying to pull more people off the street, or excuse me, off the interstate, hopefully helping reduce congestion or at least bringing jobs closer to where they live. Reducing the retail leakage. So we have one of the largest or the largest commercial retail development going on in the town of Clayton right now, and that will help greatly reduce that retail leakage issue. We're also working with our development community to ensure that we're improving our processes and procedures. One of the things that I'm sure you all have heard about is clarity, and I know our development team, community development team, is in the midst of getting all that rolled out, at least the first phase, with the second phase to come later. And then also in facilitating greater intergovernmental relations. So working with our community neighbors, and ensuring that we're, good neighbors, so to speak, but also looking for opportunities, whether it's at the state legislature or the federal government, to advocate for Clayton and ensuring that our legislators and their friends at the various agencies know about the issues that our community are facing and the unique opportunities there are for them to help us continue to grow things like our water and sewer infrastructure and ensure that we're able to meet the demands of Clayton today and as well as into the future. And then ultimately, we want to make sure people understand Clayton's unique business proposition, right? If you're looking to put a company in the state of North Carolina, we want to make sure you're looking at Clayton if it's a good fit. We're not a good fit for every company. For those companies that we want to make sure that they're looking at us. So just to give you all a little bit, last year I came in February, March. From March till the end of December, we had 117 companies looking in the state of North Carolina to locate a business. So far this year, we're about at 87. So as you can imagine, about 10 RFIs every single month float into the office of companies looking for a space, looking for a site, looking for somewhere to locate. And that is our opportunity to put Clayton in front of them. And we do that through things like this. So marketing and research, these are some cut sheets that we have on the community, some industry standard sheets that just help kind of illuminate our unique business proposition. So whether it's a site-specific or industry-specific piece, we're able to get that in front of those companies to help them understand why Clayton makes sense. The town has also engaged in a number of infrastructure investments over the past several years, all of which play into economic development, but none of which are specifically a result of economic development. But some of these things are incredibly important, or all of them are incredibly important to our economic development, health, and the economy as a whole as we move forward. So whether it's a pump station or, of course, Sims Branch Water Reclamation Facility, or things like the Southwest Public Safety Center, all those play a key role in how companies look at Clayton as a location to put their business. And so these investments, while they may do things like help solve an immediate water and sewer need today, also help put us in a position to make sure we can accommodate future growth on the industrial and commercial side as well. So here's a few recent wins. On the top is the groundbreaking there. It's still 70. That's a new industrial park there on Clayton Boulevard, as well as the Napa Hyatt grand opening that was held back in June. The Casso development there in the center, and then the North Carolina Railroad's project out there on 42 with their new concrete tilt warehouse buildings. And then, of course, Aldi and Slim Chickens. And this is just a small amount of what all has been going on, but hopefully it gives you an idea that both on the, say, retail commercial side as well on the industrial side, we're seeing more interest and we're seeing projects delivered. So this is all great news as we continue to move forward. This too is a little bit of a pet project, but something that I think is incredibly important for us as we move forward in our town's kind of trajectory. The three gentlemen here on the slide, Raj Chetty and Nathaniel Hendren and Roland Fry, are all Harvard professors who study economic mobility. And one of the things that we've noticed is if you look at the data, depending on where you live in the town of Clayton, you have a different economic mobility number. And so we have partnered with North Carolina State University to better help us understand what are the barriers to economic mobility that our citizens face every single day. So we met with them 2 weeks ago to do our kickoff. We're now moving through interviews. And so NC State is really a key component of this with helping understand the academic literature and the data, but also going out and meeting with residents and community leaders to get a better understanding of what is the real world barriers that people in our community are facing so that we can better understand how can we help them from an economic development perspective gain access to those opportunities that allow them to move up the socioeconomic ladder. We have a great roadmap and we're in the process of driving down the road. It's not always a straight line, but we're going to get there. I think the great news is that there are a lot of people doing a lot of great work, including yourselves, and that our community has a wonderful trajectory moving forward. And we are literally trying to put Clayton on the map every single day in economic development. We have a wonderful story to tell. We have a very unique business proposition that should put us at the very top of lists when companies are looking to locate anywhere within the United States. But it hasn't gotten to this point on its own. It's a lot of work being done by a lot of different people well ahead of any time that I ever stepped in the office. But I think that we have a wonderful and bright future ahead of us as long as we keep after it and we do not become complacent. So with that, I'll end, but I want to say thank you. Amanda Lewis is also in my office. She couldn't be here this evening. But of course, if there's anything that we can do for you in economic development, I hope you won't hesitate to reach out and let us know.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. You have got a question for you, I believe.
Yeah, Joe, thanks for the presentation. Can we go back to that tax base analysis slide for a second? Thank you. I really appreciate the presentation. I think we kind of get the picture of what the need here is in the community. One of the things that I know the county just undertook this study, and one of the things that concerns me about this study is my family has owned a farm here in this county for generations. We understand the impact that residential has in this county. I'm very familiar with these cost of services studies. They've been done by the American Farmland Trust for 40 years. And those studies, there's been almost 300 of them done now. And I think one of them out of the 300 have shown that residential costs less than $1. One, and that was Pamlico County here in North Carolina. So this is like saying the sky is blue. It is a fact. And I think it is the reality of residential construction wherever you go in this country. And the initial intent of these studies was to basically, they were to try to help with farmland preservation. And I think in the 40 years since they started doing these, that has changed. And one of the things you see with these studies, and I think everybody needs to understand this, is that these numbers change based on the quality of services municipalities are providing. They change dramatically. And as an example, the amount of money we spend on agriculture in this county is twice the national average. And that has to do with farmland conservation, soil and water conservation, et cetera. The number we spend on residential, that is middle of the road. So these numbers, although important and something I think we should watch, I don't think they should influence our decision-making on how we move forward. It does have to become an important part of the equation, but there's just so much more in this. And the two things that make residential more expensive than anything else is the cost of services you provide for education and for health and human services. And for us to be above the national average in that means we're spending more in those areas. So we are providing the citizens of the county and municipalities more than other municipalities across this country are. So I think this is a good slide to include in here, but it needs to have perspective when it's talked about. It does not change the fact that I think we need to balance here in the town of Clayton what we're doing with our development as it relates to commercial and industrial. But I just wanted to say that for the record. I've watched these studies over the years and understand how they can be used. And there needs to be some context with that. So I just wanted to add that. So
I think that's a very fair point. If you want to reduce your cost of services, cut the services, right? If you don't have a school system. I think one of the telling things will be when we get our survey back, because the municipality, unlike the county, we do not provide DSS, right? We do not provide school system. We don't provide education funding. And so our numbers may have a similar bend, but they will look fundamentally different, and that the services that we provide aren't duplicative of what you see at the county and aren't as robust. We're parks, roads, et cetera, but not DSS, not schools. So you're absolutely well taken.
And to your point, that's where I'm going with this. When the town of Clayton finally, when that study comes before us, these numbers probably won't reflect this. They will be very different because of the lack of education, because of the lack of DSS in there. It's good information to have. It's good to look at year over year if you continue to use that framework, using the budget each year to see where that meter's going, but to use it as a standalone, it's very difficult to do. So, but thank you.
Anybody else with any comments? Ms. Blaine?
So you mentioned when you're trying to attract business and what we need here, what is your gold standard? If you had, when you're out looking, when you're trying to attract, what's your number one, like, if I can get that, we need that here for jobs, to keep our people home,
Sure.
for us to have enough room to bring it in?
I think for us, it's high investment, high wages, and low utilities. All right. And so if we look at all the RFIs that we're seeing, and generally speaking, the trend is companies need more power, they need more water, and they need bigger sites. So hundreds of acres, thousands of acres, millions of gallons of water and sewer, an entire city's worth of power, right? That's changed a lot since I started. It didn't used to be that way at all. But that seems to be the trend: bigger projects, more investment, certainly, but with that investment comes a lot of robust energy and water and sewer needs. And this is my opinion. Certainly, the council would have the ultimate decision, but I think it makes more sense to see us look at a variety of companies versus putting all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak, right? And so whenever we are evaluating RFIs, it's really balancing the investment with the jobs at the wages, and then what are the utility requirements and their site requirements. And so a lot of the things that we're seeing, I mean, I don't give a number, but much more than half the RFIs we get, we can't respond to or choose not to respond to because of things like utility demands. Yes.
Chair, I got a question.
Go right here, Mr. Russell.
And I'm glad we kept this slide up, because what I always hear is you can't have industrial, you can't have retail without rooftops. So have we, in what we're looking at in this study, or have any studies showed the amount of rooftops it takes to bring in certain types of development? Has that ever been talked about? Because what I'm seeing here, and this is wheel, I mean, if you've been in this business, you know it costs more to serve a house than the revenue you get from it. I mean, that's common knowledge in the industry. As Jason said, it's 300 times we've seen it. It's the investment. The town is making the investment when they approve a residential development. Where does that investment hit the point that it makes sense to go to have those industrial, to have that retail? Have we kind of pinpointed that number, or has that ever been put in a study what that number may be?
I don't know that it has necessarily been put in the study, but what I would say to you is the proof is in the pudding, right? So the town's population is roughly 35,000, give or take, and now we're seeing the largest commercial development in the town's history. I don't know that that would have come if we were, say, 15,000 people, right? And if you look at just retailers in general, and more on the commercial side, because retailers are much more formulaic in their approach than, say, an industrial company, they're looking at things like population, average wage, drive times. I mean, there's something, there's an old joke about citing grocery stores. You put a grocery store near population so that by the time they buy ice cream, it's not melted before they get home, right? And so there's certain formulaic approaches that retailers use in deciding when's the time right to enter the market, right? And so if you say, look at Selma, North Carolina has a population much less than ours, but yet they have the first Target in Johnson County, right? And so what is driving that? It's a lot more than just their own population. It's things like I-95 and other drive time factors. And so I think we're reaching at a critical point. And in that 30 to 50,000 person population is whenever you start seeing a lot of the national big box retailers show up. And then from there's a lot more unique things. So I know one of the demands that we get is a Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's has specific formulaic requirements on population, average wage density, demographic data. And that's why you see so few of them around the triangle. And so some of it is we're just now hitting those benchmarks within the retailers' formulas to locate.
You hit the word for me, Trader Joe's. Everyone talks about Chick-fil-A, but I'd rather have a Trader Joe's than a Chick-fil-A. The reason I asked the question, you shouldn't have said that out loud. The reason I asked the question is because one of the things that we try to do, or at least I personally take this as a personal way, is try to convince our citizens on what's right for the town. Because groups of people don't necessarily know what's best for them. I don't mind saying that out loud. It's true. Groups of people don't necessarily know what's best for them. Okay? They think they do, but they don't. Right? So anything that we can do to convince our citizens that we're moving in the right path and moving in the right direction, it's because at the end of the day, as you see here, and as we know, it's all about services. That's what I say every time we're up here with a vote, every time we're talking about something, it's about services. It's not about costs. It's about services. So how can we serve our citizens the best we can? And I feel anytime we can give them more information and let them understand, well, how did that Chick-fil-A get there? How did that Target get there? How did that whatever get there? Anytime we can explain to our citizens how that happened, they'll have a better understanding on why we got there or where we are, and understand why we're growing and why we need to grow. So that's the reason I asked the question, is any information that we can give to our citizens to help them understand why we're doing what we're doing would be helpful.
Understood.
Go ahead. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, growth, a lot of folks are concerned about growth, and we hear from people every time we have a planning board meeting. I'm concerned about growth. And Johnson County has changed a lot over the past several years, and so has Clayton. I guess, how would you explain it to folks that we cannot just say no to everything that comes before, whether, or recommend denial before planning board or before the folks at town council make their decision, whether it's residential, commercial, industrial. If the town made a conscious decision just to say no, if we're at 35,000 people and everybody decides they really didn't want us to get this big, but we are, and we should stop right now, what kind of downstream effects are we looking at, whether it's related to utility cost or our taxes, services? Like, what are the true effects? Because I really don't think a lot of folks can understand and articulate what that would look like.
Right. It's a fair question. The immediate answer, I think, would be you would probably face litigation, right? There are certain requirements that are incumbent upon the town council where a lot of times their hands are tied, right, when it comes down to development. That's probably gotten worse in some regard over the past couple of years as state law has changed. But it certainly impacts everything downstream, right? Not growing is worse than growing. I know it's a hard thing to imagine, but in that map where you saw all those grayed out counties, if you are there, you're facing real challenges, like school closures and consolidation. Like, I mean, it's much different. Growth is not easy. It is something that we are actively, I hope you have seen, we're actively in touch with and are trying to manage the best way possible so that we get the growth that we want to see long term. But to turn off the spigot or build a wall and say no more ever, outside of the legal issues would have a fundamental negative impact on things like the cost of services that are delivered, right? The more people paying into the system, the better. You get a lot more economies of scale. And that is, in some part helps drive down costs. But I don't know any government is in a position to where they could just say, no one else can move here.
Right.
Right now we have over 10,000 residential units already approved that are in some form of entitlement, construction, et cetera. So the town is going to probably double in population in, say, in the next 10, 20 years. I think Johnston County by 2035 is expected to hit about 375,000 residents. A lot of that is going to find their way here in Clayton. On top of that, we service a lot more than what's in our municipality. So you think about everybody that lives outside the town limits, that drives in to enjoy a park, go to the library, ride on our streets, et cetera. That impacts the town and our service delivery. And so,
and with that in mind, I think under our purview, we're looking at obviously the UDO, the comprehensive growth plan, the transportation plan, the other documents that help inform how we make our decision. What advice would you give to us, or I mean, even to staff? Are there some changes that can make it maybe easier for certain commercial or industrial folks to come here? Or what do we need to be thinking about as a planning board as it relates to your work moving forward?
Sure. I know you all in a particular case look solely at the case, right? You have to in a lot of ways. But I would just encourage you all to keep the bigger picture in mind, right? How does this impact the town as a whole? Not just a particular case, which is important because they're coming before you all with specific issues related to a particular parcel of property, et cetera. But the real question is how does that singular piece fit into the overall puzzle, and how does it help the community reach its goal of achieving its vision that is set by the town council and the citizens? And I think that's the biggest message that I hope everyone takes away from it, is that everybody's doing their own individual parts, right? We're out marketing and trying to get companies here. Planning is doing what they do, engineering, the planning board, everyone is doing what they need to do, but we can't be successful if we're not all pulling in the same direction. Because at the end of the day, each one of our parts are put together to ultimately bring about the new Clayton, what Clayton's going to look like. And so y'all's decisions, the council's decisions, the work that our department's doing every day, we may have a decision that's made today, but really we're building the Clayton for 20, 50 years down the road. And so the real question is, how can we ensure we're doing what we need to today to get to that best version of the community in 20 years or onward? So keep the bigger picture in mind. Right. Yes, sir. Thank you.
So Joe, just to Mr. Sarasky's point, can this presentation be put on the town website? Is it there yet? Is it something that can be made available to the public for access?
It is a public document, certainly. I'll speak with powers that be to make all that work. But
see if we can find a home for it. I just wanted to repeat one thing you said again, and I think we're all aware of this. I believe, and somebody in the room can confirm this, I think we currently have 12,000 housing units in this town, or somewhere 12 to 13,000, something like that. And we have 10,000 entitled, to the point you made. And that, for these commercial and industrial potential clients here for Clayton, means more than anything does, more so than the existing population. It's the fact that we have that many housing units entitled, and that's a big deal. So it's the demand, I think, is going to be there as we move forward. So.
I'm just, thank you for your presentation, Joe. I thought it was very well done and appreciate it and very informative. This is more of a question or comment, more of a simplistic nature, but do you have, when you're looking at potential developers for Clayton, people that might be attracted here, do you have a ratio or a formula or a proportion as to how much residential versus how much industrial versus how much commercial and retail that you're trying to attract? Because I hear a lot of people that I talk with, basically their comments are, the only thing I see in Clayton right now are houses and big warehouses that I have no idea what's happening in the warehouses, but there's nowhere that we can shop. And I always remind them that, they're clearing for the big commercial development next to Walmart, which they think is great, but they also say, well, traffic's going to be horrible. I'm like, well, you can't have everything perfect. But it seems a lot of comments that I hear from local residents that I talk to is they feel like for the town saying that it wants to keep people in Clayton and our tax dollars and our revenue in Clayton, by and large, we may work here, we may live here, but we still, and I know this comes up periodically in our planning board meetings as a comment that I hear and I agree with, but what are we doing commercial and retail wise to keep people in Clayton as opposed to going to Raleigh, Cary, wherever for their leisurely activities? Are we working on do we have a proportion or a formula for how we want to balance this? Or is it just, we're just looking, I hate to say randomly because I don't mean it that way, but what's the method to you deciding or to the potential developers, whether it's retail, commercial, residential or industrial, how do you go about deciding what you want to entertain or who you're looking for or how we want the town to grow just overall with that mix of those three types of developments?
I hope I understand your question correctly. If we're at, the tax-based split we're at now, let's call it 80-20 for round numbers. Our target is to begin to see the needle move. And if we could get to 70-30, I would consider that a great success. What I think we all have, and I was talking to my counterpart of the county about this too, about trying to turn cars around. What we all have to come to grips with is that we're at where we are today, and let's say it's 80-20, but at the same time that we're speaking, we're seeing more residential put on the ground, right? So you've got all these units and entitlements are under construction, et cetera. Those are going to be delivered at a rate much faster than industrial or commercial. And so we have to be able to not only dig ourselves out of a hole, but also get ahead. And that's going to be a difficult challenge, but I think it's a worthy endeavor. I don't know that there is a specific, we're going to try to go 75-25 by X date, right? Matter of fact, I think if we said it, we would probably miss it. But it isn't lost on us to try to get the needle to move in the other direction so that we can begin, spreading the cost burden of government over more than just our residential tax base. And so we are moving in the right direction, but the real question is, are we able to keep up with what's already on the books and adding to it as residential continues to increase? And we're going to get the numbers on that. So I hope that answers your question. Whenever we're going out to market, trying to look for companies and developers and, to locate here, I'll just make it very clear. We don't focus on residential. That's not something that we contemplate. We also don't recruit in distribution companies or low wage paying companies. If you're going to locate in Clayton, we want to know that you're going to pay an average wage that is at or greater than the county average so that you can afford to live and work here. It's our intention to make sure we get the right employers and not just any employers.
I just want to say, I appreciate your presentation. I think it was excellent. I will tell you, I'm a funeral director. And so, medically speaking, I'm not a doctor. I'm the reverse. But medically speaking, biologically speaking, the human body, you're either growing, living, and thriving, or you are drying, declining, and dying. There is no in between. You're doing one or the other at all points of your life. And sometimes it's moving faster one way than it is another. It's no different for a town. And I think sometimes if you're rapidly doing either one of those things I just described, the growing, living, or the declining and dying, if you're rapidly doing either one of those, it's uncomfortable. When you're a child, I've got a grandson, 19 months old, he's growing rapidly. Sometimes that's uncomfortable because, they don't wear out clothes, they don't wear out shoes. It's, they're tearing the house up, all these things that happen for the 19-month-old. When they get to a certain point, it's not that painful anymore. But then if you've got somebody who's in the process of dying, it's equally as uncomfortable going in that direction. And I think sometimes towns don't realize that they're doing one or the other at all times. And when it gets uncomfortable is when a town is growing. We're growing. And I hear from people, we've got, all we've got here is, a lot of fast food places. I hear that. We're plenty of fast food places and lots of places to eat chicken. That's great. I like chicken. And that's all true. But I think the uncomfortable thing for some people right now is we are in that rapid growing phase where, we hardly have time to wear out something we've got now before we're looking for the next thing, just like a person would do. But I think the reverse of that is something nobody that lives anywhere around Clayton would be in favor of, which is the dying and declining. So I appreciate that the town council, as well as you in particular, are focused on how to keep us green and growing. I think that's an important thing for the town.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. We appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time this evening.
Yes, sir.
Next on our list this evening, 5C, is Planning Board Training Session with Mr. Conrad Almedo. I'll turn it over to you, Conrad.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. Time for a planning board training session for the exciting stuff. Hard to follow up on that excellent presentation. And I'm also just to recognize, I've got the whole planning department behind me, except for Haley. She's off this week, well deserved. But if I can just recognize our planning team, we've got Robert Tate, our senior planner. We have Lori Bryant, our planner one. Lauren Staudenmayer, our senior planner. Corinne Miller, she's our planning technician. We have Abby Napier, who you just met, our planning intern. We have code enforcement. We have Susan Long, and we have Lee Sullivan. So just to let you know, we are 100% fully staffed for the first time this year. So I'm going to give you just a big thanks to Chad Meadows who helped prepare this presentation with some of my insertions. But the question is, what is planning? Looking at the definition, it's how to do something. You're kind of thinking about that future. The American Planning Association, I like what they're saying is creating great communities for everyone. So how do we make our communities better? And I think that's a good nugget of what planning is. That's what my job is as a planning director, is make sure that we're making a great community for Clayton, for everybody to enjoy Clayton. So you the whole comp plan is really a part of that process. That helps us agree. So that's where we have our desired future state, and then determine the actions necessary to achieve that desired future state. So that's like our applications, our permits, all the things that the folks behind me are doing. And then reaching consensus is really when we bring something before the board and before council. Not really getting into federal law, Euclid versus Ambler, which established zoning like in 1936. But basically, the federal government authorizes states, therefore counties, local jurisdictions to utilize zoning. Chapter 160D is really where a lot of pretty much almost all of our zoning regulations are tied into. So the planning board, your planning board is buried in state statutes, 160D 301. And it's talking about the planning board and the role of the planning board. What I'd like to point out in this is something that the planning board in Clayton does that is not required by state law, which is to hold public meetings, to actually engage citizens. So we've put that process as far as our public hearing for the town council is also the same process we do for our public meetings. So that's something that we do above and beyond what state law would otherwise require. So the effective plans, we brought before the board the Clayton downtown plan. Earlier on, before that, we brought the small area, the Gateway 42 plan. Your recommendation is important. It's also required. So that when we bring something before the planning board, it's a recommendation to support or not support. But really, before we get to that point, staff and the consultant team, we've all kind of hammered out. We bring in a plan that you all are well aware of. We also brought before the board the Parks and Recreation plan, if you all remember, and the big comprehensive transportation plan. That was our first comprehensive transportation plan for Clayton, and we're looking forward to soon, hopefully launching our comprehensive plan update. But this is something that you all are aware of when you do your recommendations with those motions. You're making recommendations based on approval, consistent, inconsistent, denial, consistent, or denial inconsistent with the future land use map, which is just recently kind of not too old of a plan, but that's something that we're working on. And that's the challenge that y'all have, is how do we balance the things that Joe's talking about with that growth, that uncomfortable growth, if you will, with the future plan that we got. So the plans clarify local governments must have a comprehensive plan to apply zoning regulations. So this box is checked. Some jurisdictions in North Carolina didn't have a comprehensive plan, and the Chapter 160D required that they have that if they were to have zoning. So we got the intent of the comprehensive plans, identified 10 recommended elements of a comp plan. Consulting with the zoning chains requires a comprehensive plan to be considered during zoning amendments. So this would be a rezoning request. And clarifies that a zoning amendment may be adopted even if it's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. And the reason why is because the comp plan is guidelines, they're recommendations. It's not like the UDO, which is the actual policy. So these are some of the documents that we just kind of talked about, just to bring them up to y'all. We got the comp growth plan, Parks and Rec plan, Clayton downtown plan, the comp transportation plan, that Gateway 42 small area plan. And just to reiterate, when we do this process for planning, when it comes before the board, you can trust that it's gone before the public. It's been part of a stakeholder engagement process, that the town isn't willy-nilly changing future land use map designations, but is actually doing these changes in accordance with structured public engagement, public noticing as required or as part of a process, so that when something comes before you, you're aware that it's been, that the public, that the town has had an opportunity, the residents have had an opportunity to be a part of that process. So our comp transportation plan was a great example of that, where we did 2 public engagement meetings, sessions, presenting the documents to the public. We had some online surveys, and I'm looking forward to when we launch our new comp plan as well to do that process. Lots of great citizen engagement. So when you get this plan, you got something that the town residents are supporting. So just to reiterate that underline right there, the planning board may hold public meetings and legislative hearings in the course of preparing the regulation. So again, this is really showing that the planning board and what we do here for Clayton in terms of engaging the community is really great. And I know that in terms of training, you all have seen this room fully packed with a bunch of residents. I sometimes think of this meeting as a dress rehearsal for the big show when something goes before council. So the role of the planning board, prepare, review, monitor, and update the comp plan. So when you all recommend something that's inconsistent or consistent, it goes before council and they make an approval of inconsistency, that gives us an opportunity to update our future land use map on a piece-by-piece basis, just so you're aware of that. Facilitate citizen engagement. So we've got a great opportunity for the chair, vice chair to sometimes make sure we get people those 3 minutes, give them an opportunity to speak and voice their concerns, and y'all do some great engagement. And that participation has really helped us work with applicants to get a project even finer, even better tuned before it goes to council. So it does have a huge impact on our planning process that the planners are engaging in and working with applicants. Development regulations and procedures. So the UDO is is the big document. Our code enforcement is out there, making sure that folks are abiding by our sign regulations. For example, when we're doing inspections of certificates of occupancy, that they're abiding by the regulations that are in place for buildings. And then reviewing and commenting on all the zoning text and map amendments. So that's what we bring before the board frequently. So per the UDO, we've got 9 members with at least 1 member from the ETJ, the extraterritorial jurisdiction. Powers and duties, comprehensive plan and functional plans, recommendations on text amendments, special studies required. Conduct public meetings, not public hearings, and I just want to distinguish that. It's a public meeting, not a public hearing. Your voting is a simple majority. We have to have a quorum of 5. So when I send out the notices to y'all, I appreciate the communication if you can't make it to a meeting, because that's really important for us to conduct business. Provide recommendations. And I'm happy that we've got that recommendation sheet that Heidi's helping us with, because when we take that sheet that says your recommendation, it goes to town council as part of the record. And with our legal team to help address any conflicts of interest. So if you're a consultant working for a project that happens to go before the board, we have Emily Colley with our town council to discuss if there's any technical issues that might arise from conflicts of interest. So here's some elements, conditional rezonings. These are conditional rezonings require property owner to approve or to be in a concurrence with the recommendations or the conditions of approval. And then conventional rezonings, pretty much one zone district to the other. And text amendments are modifications to the UDO. These are pretty much the straightforward ones, conventional rezonings. And just so you all know, reaffirm, when a district changes to another district, all the uses are now would be approved under that district. So if there are uses under residential low or large lot RLL are changing to CRM, all the uses in the conventional under CRM zoning district would be allowed or permitted or subject to that district's requirements. The town has taken some town-initiated rezonings as well, just as a heads up, because we're also in with the whole development of Clayton. So conditional rezoning establishes a revised conditional-based zoning district. So we got 3 types of these kinds of conditionals. We got type 1, where you're looking at limiting the uses. So there's no plan. You might see these coming forward soon. So people are restricting the number of uses that would otherwise be allowed through the conventional rezoning. Limited standard, probably not too often we'll see a type 2, but the type 3 is the one that you all will see, or the concept plan. And that's really the conversation as to what direction an applicant goes down is something that we discussed during a pre-application conference. An applicant may not know where they're going to put their buildings or where their parking lots or what uses are going to be there, but they know they want to have a range of uses to market the property. So in that case, we would have a limited use recommendation. If someone has an idea of the size or the location of their buildings, they want to have, like think of the Heavener property. That was one of our first concept plan projects with the UDO, and you saw this kind of a bubble diagram. Well, that lets the developer pick and choose exactly where their site plan is going to occur, how the parking lot's going to lay out, and not have that level of detail really, blur the decision-making process. But those are the different kinds of conditional rezonings y'all are going to see. Mm-hmm.
And with that, with conditional zoning, typically we don't have them do full site plans because developers shouldn't have to do a bunch of engineering and site work or engineering work before they get the approval from town council.
Correct.
So,
yeah, it helps reduce that barrier of entry into the idea of getting the project approved. So they're getting that that concept approved, and that does run off the land. So if you approve conditional rezoning for 100 new units and it's approved by council, then that property is entitled for that to occur. But again, the subdivision of those lots and how they're going to be carved out will come in later on through a major subdivision application. There was a slight exception to that with the Winston Point townhomes where they had some lot layout. So it's kind of when we get to that level of detail, it's probably resultant from some active conversation that just needed to occur, and that concept plan gets modified to reflect that. But our direction as staff is to not get to that level of detail initially for that reason, to avoid the upfront engineering costs, the design costs that are associated with the site plan level of detail. And what's important is the conditions. Typically, we'll have 7 standard conditions, and then there's a long list of other conditions of approval that accompany. So you've got the illustrated concept plan, and then the written document of the conditions of approval, the long list of promises, if you will, for the development. It's important that this is initiated by the landowner, not the town is doing, unless we own the property. So just a table about conventional rezoning versus conditional rezoning.
And Conrad, while you're here, within the UDO, there are a fair amount of requests, if you will, that are by right development, correct? So developers could submit based on the number of units they want to put in a given area, and they can run that through a staff process, and it never has to see the planning board nor town council. And so there is that option available, but typically y'all probably see folks would rather increase or in other ways modify the UDO, and then it does come before the planning board, and they usually get more favorable conditions on the property for their development moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. So the UDO has that list of table 4.25 where you have all the listed uses that are allowed. Usually it have a P for permitted. So if the zone district has a P, it's permitted, and the board won't see that project. So, and if the density is not exceeding what the UDO requires, if they're able to meet the design standards for that project, for instance, then no, the board won't see it. But that's a use by right, and some applicants are willing to just buy that land and do what is allowed by right on that property.
So it's fair to say that if a development is coming before the planning board and then the town council, oftentimes they're deviating from what the UDO is asking of them.
Correct. Yeah, and that's interesting. That point is interesting in that the market is almost generating that kind of, I would say anecdotally, I don't have the data to prove it, but the land is being sold, and the district that it's in right now is kind of a legacy district, if you will. Maybe it's low density RLL, and that's how Clayton had its zone for many years. But now the market says that it can be something different, and so the zoning change, and the developers will usually have a vision that really is kind of hard to park in the conventional district, and that's why we end up with these kind of conditional rezonings. Conditional rezoning is typically also called a plan unit development or plan development, and they're really intended to be tailored zoning regulations for a specific project. And we could go down a road where the municipality can have a whole load of these conventional or these conditional rezonings throughout the city. And then there's a fine balance of at what point is your conventional zoning districts doing the job that it needs to do, so that you don't have as many conditional rezoning, because there is a lack of guarantee through a conditional rezoning, right? Someone has to come before council and get approval. And that level of risk, and also really that risk is a concern sometimes from the development community, but really it's also time that it takes to get these projects moving. So when we do a pre-application conference with the developer, they're going to ask us, what's your time? How much time is it going to take? And that often dictates sometimes their project scope. It dictates how they approach the property, and maybe how they go back to the seller and negotiate as far as how much time it takes to get their project, their vision approved. So it's something that Joe's team works well with. And they talk with our engineering department to get the utilities. There's a lot of great questions that come up, really just from the zoning district on that. Yeah. Okay. What I encourage, on conditional rezoning, the deviation from the standards, right, comes up. And I'm encouraging staff to go, how do you answer the question of enhancements? So, you can deviate, but what are you bringing? How is your project going to be an enhancement to the community? And that's where the conditions of approval kick in, and where we look at what the UDO would require otherwise, and to see what other low-hanging fruit is in the UDO, so design standards, sustainability incentive, practices, et cetera, that the developer can easily point to give you that objective answer to that subjective of what is a higher quality, right? Someone can think of higher quality in many different ways, but if we can just say, well, they're going to meet 3 of the requirements when the UDO only requires 2, for instance, that's what I'm encouraging staff to look at when we get to these questions of answering. The applicant's requesting deviations, but they're also giving us these enhancements, because then that will lead to a quality product. Higher quality is really my goal with the town.
And I hate to continue to butt in, but I think it's a good point of part of the reason why I think folks on the board find this to be helpful is when developers come in with projects, residential or otherwise, oftentimes it's the community that meets them that's concerned about the project. And those enhancements or helpful items to benefit the community around the project can oftentimes be the difference maker. And I think the earlier that happens with the development team, the better it is for them as they move through the process before they come to planning board. And we have a ton of questions being brought by the neighbors or other folks in the community or by ourselves. And then ultimately town council has similar questions. So I think it's helpful to have this understanding and then get the perspective of the board early in the process so that we don't put too much pressure on those projects when they come before us at this point when they're months into their development.
Yeah, it's a great point. Before an item gets before the board, it's gone through the technical review committee of the town. It's gone through all the different, which includes all the different review agencies. So you should be getting an item that's pretty much well baked. And to your point is, we want to prepare applicants for success. So when they come before the board, and I think that success is really baked in with the property owner, the applicants agreeing to, yeah, this is what the project is hitting. These are the marks that we're hitting with our conditions of approval and with our concept plan. And really, the dream is for them to give a project that is hitting both the board, council, and also the community's expectations. I could probably talk about conditional rezoning and constant zoning all night, so I'm going to kind of move on a little bit here. So we do define what a concept plan is. Believe it or not, that's been a discussion of what kind of plan. Is it a sketch plan, concept plan? I'll leave it at that. We have distinguished between the site plan. Again, it's more detailed, and a concept plan is really a concept, but it's also a formal concept of that project. Here's an example. It's the Heavener project. So you can see the bubble diagram that they've got for multifamily. And, there was a lot of good discussion when this went before council as well. The residents were able to comment on it. Council was able to discuss it. So there was a lot of good discussion really off of a concept plan, right? We weren't getting into the level of detail. A lot of the details that the developer was wanting us to have some wiggle room in was resolved through the conditions of approval. So this is a real good example of how a bubble diagram, if you will, can help inform this project. And this is one of, as Joe was saying, this is one of the biggest new commercial developments. We don't really talk. It also has multifamily in there too, which is a big deal about this project.
Conrad, I've got a question. This kind of goes back to what Mr. Applewhite was saying. This is a perfect example, so I'm glad you brought this up. So it's become public knowledge now that there will be, I mean, if everything works out right, a Costco here.
Yeah, $1.50 hot dog with a soda. That's right.
So with that being said, Costco has been clear in some of their sustainability statements that they will build 12 warehouses that are I don't want to say zero impact, but they have gone on record, public record, saying we will build 12 warehouses in the coming year that use best construction practices, sustainability, et cetera. How can we formally request, ask to be one of those 12s? How can we is that something we can do in the process outside of the planning board, with town council, with your group? Can we do that? Is that a possibility?
So that's something that from a planning department, we've baked that up right now. It's been approved by council. So us to request that of the applicant right now is more of an ask, and asking them saying yes or no, or maybe the Clayton warehouse is. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not sure if that warehouse is going to be one of those 12, but that's kind of where we look at our sustainability incentives in the UDO and try to bake in some of those requirements in projects as they come forward.
I guess my question is, can we ask?
Yeah, we can ask. I'll talk to Joe, see what we can do for that. Mm-hmm. Yep, he's there. Well, what your question is really bringing up is with your role, I'm looking at this as an extension of our staff, is looking at the UDO and pinpointing what the UDO requires. I'll give you the shortcuts to sustainability incentives. I know that the board has talked about sustainability incentives with respect to mass grading, with respect to level 2 charging. And then there's the non-residential design standards, and there's optional single family design standards. Now, keep in mind though, the applicants need to agree to this. So to overburden an applicant or come up with above and beyond requirements, if you will, may just be recommendations for council to consider. So it's a fine balance to discuss and to have where, and the applicants are, that's kind of where you'll see them going back to their team and talking about what they're willing or able to do. And sometimes there's real good reason why things are not being proffered in a way that might even be up to what I would hope for as a planning director, but it's still, I'm looking at this as a project that is good for the town, right? At the end of the day.
And I appreciate what you're saying. When that came before us, we didn't know what it was going to be. And frankly, some of the things they talk about exceed our standards. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of why I'm asking the question is in some cases it appears that they exceed our standards, especially when it comes to concrete and some of the other things they use in their construction. So.
And sometimes that level of detail of the construction is really probably at the almost like LEED certification level or LEED Platinum or LEED Gold, and that we do have a sustainability incentive practice that asks you can get points for that, but having it be a requirement of the construction, sometimes applicants, well, I don't have a user that's willing to go through that process, but we're going to build to those standards, but just not get the certification of LEED, for instance. So text amendments, I have heard the planning board's commentary about text amendments being initiated by citizens versus the board itself and council, et cetera. Downzoning is a serious consideration as far as removing permitted uses to a zone district. And we do have the review criteria, 7 review criteria, and we have the recommendation going to city council with the written statement from you guys. And that's the letter that's the form that we have now with Heidi, where you sign that form and it goes to council. And just so you know, text amendments, we've got the next round already underway. So this is some kind of bigger questions, who do you all represent? Can we consider public opinion opposition? What's the difference between bargaining and negotiation? How do we avoid personal preference in favor of objective standards and others? So who do we represent? I'll focus on who we represent is the public interest of the entire community, the adopted policy guidance, and a fair and unbiased process. So I'm thinking of that big picture, which I think, the board, you all doing a really good job of that. When you have your discussions, when you engage with the public, when you talk with the developer, I think that you all are doing a fantastic job. Keeping that fair, you're expressing your thoughts and you're voting with what you all think is the best vote for Clayton. So can we consider public opinion opposition? Yes. What are the planning issues being raised? So a great example is school system. Will this project bring in more students? And it's really not our purview. So that's a good one. A good example sometimes comes up. The next one is going to be transportation. You all do get those transportation impact analyses, where you see how the improvements, and we're capturing those recommendations often in our conditions of approval. Stormwater questions come up. There was a good discussion about having bubblers and stormwater ponds, and our engineering department answered that question well, where, disturbing the process, the functionality of, so there's a lot of technical answers to some of these questions that go outside of the discipline of planning. And a good one is evidence-based. You're not quasi-judicial, but it doesn't hurt to think of the facts.
And Conrad, to that point, I think it's helpful for the public that may be coming as well and concerned about a project, that they too also bring evidence-based ideas and solutions. I'm not saying they have to hire an engineer always, but certainly that information is helpful because it is tricky to know, if you've never been to somebody's property, what the neighboring, new development next door may have an impact on their property. And just generally speaking, I think it is helpful when public brings those sort of, I don't want to call them a report, but something that's more than just hearsay.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I think what you're bringing up is a great point with regards to empowering citizens to be good citizens in that respect of presenting information in a manner that the board can really consider and weigh. So preference-based examples, if I'm coming up, I don't like the way that this project is versus I think that the buildings might be too high when they're next to my adjacent. Can the height be considered to be reduced? So that language is something that is, because you might get someone speaking before the board who's the first time speaking in a public meeting, and they might have been a resident in Clayton for 20 years, and this happens to be the one project that they really care about and is going to impact them. So if they're coming to the board, it might be a good thing for you all to ask that. And you sometimes do. I hear that. You ask them those technical questions. You try to dive into what it is that they're asking, because someone might not be able to articulate that technical aspect that is relating to the buffer distance or the height of the building or the width of their vegetation buffer. And that's kind of where, if that question comes up, the board, you all have done a great job of looking to staff who can then provide some of the technical answers and get some of those questions resolved. But absolutely, evidence-based versus preference-based, that's a real good point when you all are receiving the public comment. So negotiation versus bargaining, that's the agreement that the property owner and the applicants are part of that process of conditional rezonings. And staff has gotten the project to a certain level, but if there's that, we can't necessarily force someone to give us something. Even the federal laws about nexus and rough proportionality. So if I'm a developer and there's an intersection 2 miles away that has a lot of issues, having my project do improvements to that might not be a viable consideration. So the board shouldn't make its decision off of those kinds of unrelated impacts. So you're looking at your site specific, you're tied to that property, but then you're kind of looking at the bigger picture, but just keep in mind the resolution of the suggestions that come to play. And I do think the board does a good job of balancing that as well. Yeah, that last one is, what can we get from the applicant? It's not really the name of our business. We're looking at, from staff point, we're presenting you legitimate requests, conditions, concept plan, tying it to the UDO as best as possible, and then any other slight intricacies that the developer might want to have clarified for a future user that they might have consideration with. How do we avoid personal preference in favor of objective standards? When presented with an application you're concerned about, notice and describe your reaction, translate your reaction into a planning topic. Connect that topic with an adopted policy or standard, which I do hear often, looking at the UDO, which is a great start, or our comp plan. And does the evidence support your concern? It might be worthwhile to even have this in our informational. I'm already thinking of ideas of how to improve our agenda packet, maybe as a little informational tidbit to help the public when they're, like that public information piece that we have, maybe include some of this language in there. So how do we avoid personal preferences in favor of objective standards? Slow down decision-making, try explaining your concerns without using the words think, feel, or like. Ask what standards are you relying on and translate reactions into reasons. And there's this example of a hot pink building. Folks might think that's great and some might not. And so the questions here might be, should there be awnings? Does the sign need to be a pole sign? Can there be a variation in relief? If I can get this guy. See, yeah. So this is, if I was looking at this and someone came with me, I would say, can you put, is there like is there a customer seating area outside? Can you have a variation in the roof line, modulation? Can you have extra surrounds around the windows? Do you need to reduce the number of awnings or increase the number of awnings? And having relief and building design can help address things that are less subjective or more subjective, like color. There are some developments, though, that do have approved color palettes, different kinds of shades of tan, brown, black, off-red, terracotta.
I don't recall seeing this color in any of the approved.
Yeah, what would happen if somebody wanted to do this on Main Street?
We don't have any. We have some UDO regulations about bright colors like this in the UDO, but if that building's existing and they want to change their color to a different color, then they wouldn't be subject to our non-residential design standards. I once knew an attorney who had a bright purple house, so he would just had a bright purple house because that's where he wanted people to know where his business was. And he was an attorney, so I didn't really say much about that.
You got a question?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Daniel.
Kind of in relation to that, is there a reason, or what's the, in your best opinion as planning director, what's the reason that America has gone gray beige in everything that we do, just devoid of all color, like we used to have things?
That's a great question. I really don't know why we've gone down that color scheme. I'm originally from Southern California, and that scheme is everywhere. So you've got red houses, white houses. The coloring of things, I don't know. I wonder if it's the materials, like just that kind of the pigments, possibly, using bright colors might tend to fade. So just the color of stucco, if you will. I was just out in England and they had different colors too. It was like mostly whites and grays and light yellows and stuff. So I don't know. It's interesting. The color palettes of different building materials, I think, might be the answer. What tends to last longer? It's a good question though. Sorry?
I was going to say some of it may have been government regulation previously, but I digress.
Some municipalities have the ability to restrict color palettes in architectural design. So if we were in a historic overlay district, we could regulate that a little bit tighter, I'm thinking. But so colors could have period relations. But for us right now, the UDO has language about bright colors, accent like neon yellow or something like that. But existing building color palettes a little bit different. I think Joe hit a lot of the future trends. Clayton's growing at the end of the day. We're in a really great spot where we're growing and we're acknowledging that growth. But I'll just run through these. So the shifting of technical reviews, site plans, and subdivisions by staff is accelerated. So there's a lot of work being done behind by the folks that are working behind me that are just getting these site plan reviews, review cycles. And staff was always looking for ways to make that process efficient, hence Clarity. Clarity is the online permit submittal. So someone can submit permits to the town at 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday evening, if that's when they're able to do it. So there's a lot of improvements to that. Downzoning is a big one for us, but that's just the state law doesn't allow us to do downzoning, and housing supplies and barriers to housing. That's something that the state is currently looking into with regards to allowing residential units in commercial and industrially zoned properties. So I'm gonna go ahead and move through here. These are some pictures I took about a month ago, and I'm sure it's changed even since then. So you've got Carolina Overlook North, and this is that kind of thing about what you all are approving this month or next month is going to be built in probably about 2 years. I can't say that for every community I've worked in. Sometimes it's 6 years just to get to the planning board. And in that time, you got 150 units that's held up before it gets to the planning board. You'll are approving units.
I'm probably the only person up here who was in the approval of that at the time it came through, because it's taken that long.
Yeah, this development, this is the north.
I know.
This is the north one, yeah, and it's taken a couple years. And were you around when the south part was also approved? Yeah, they're building. So we're getting projects that are going through the subdivision process, and they're rushing to get that plat recorded so they can start pulling building permits as soon as possible. So we're looking at a really short turnaround, relatively speaking. Those Shotwell apartments, those were approved by council, recommended for approval by the board. Less than 2 years ago, and you can see them under construction right there. So impacts the UDO and the comp transportation plan as well. You're all part of that overall planning process. So that concludes the training. I'm available if you have any questions.
Chair, I have 2 questions real quick. So there's been 2 things that happened in the state legislature recently that I have questions about and how it affects how we do things moving forward. One is parking minimums. I don't know if that affects us at all or how that affects us. That's one of them. And then the second one was they added into the budget, I got it, I'm reading it here. They got added into the budget about making it easier to challenge local zoning and development decisions in court, and how you can now basically bypass the Board of Adjustment. That's in the new budget. So I just wanted to see kind of your reaction, the planning department's reaction, the town's reaction to those 2 things.
So the first one is on parking requirements. So we have a nice table that has all the different uses in our UDO, and it shows the parking requirements that use would require. And this change in state law, by January 1st of next year, we're going to need to have that. It won't be applicable. So what we're looking at different strategies of how to, I'd like to have that since it can't be in the UDO, is I'm thinking about having that parked in our UDO procedures manual, just so it's a reference, because that data comes from the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and that data is relevant. I don't want to lose those parking ratios. So if it comes up as a conditional rezoning and you see no parking being provided, staff and the board and council have the ability to look at something and go, can you give us, like, what parking ratio is it being provided? Is it meeting what we had in 2026? But yeah, state law is not going to let us require that through the UDO's requirements. So permitted uses by right won't need to abide by that. If we have a conditional rezoning, though, then that opens up that door. So there's a way for that. But as far as the UDO update, I'll be working with Chad Meadows to get that corrected. And as far as the other comment that you think, I'm wondering, I did read that, and I want to say, I wonder if that was for the quasi-judicial processes, because if it's diverting the Board of Adjustment, when we adopted the UDO in 2023, many of the decisions that were quasi-judicial were put in the conditional rezoning, so that might not have an impact, but I'll make sure to double check on that.
The only reason why I bring that up is because we are volunteers.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that our livelihoods are not taken because of decisions that we make on this board.
Sure.
And so that's the main,
yes.
that's what I'm trying to get at here, is that we're not personally, people think that we're personally liable for the decisions we make, that we're making decisions based as representatives of the town.
Okay. I don't have an answer for that right now, but we'll have to look into that a little bit more.
I've got two questions. Can you go back to slide 4 for a second?
30 some slides in here. Thank you for your patience, by the way, in this presentation.
That's, yeah, that was it, I think. This one. So B1, it clearly says maybe assign the following duties. Currently, we're not really doing much in the area of number 1. So I kind of have a question, and it may be a legal question. I know there's rules around a quorum. So I'm wondering, would there be any opportunities, let's say, on a night where we don't have anything on the public agenda, where we as a group of 10 could get together and have conversations about, I wrote down a couple questions. Number 1, I think it would help us do our job better if, and we fill in the blank and we talk about that. Number 2, I think it would help the town if. Is there anything that would keep us from doing that on, let's just say, on a night where we don't have a public meeting as a group?
I don't see any reason why we wouldn't. I would probably ask for the board if y'all wanted to have that conversation explored. Now, when I typically see that, it's usually in a retreat setting, also as part of a comp plan update, where there's an exploration, and I would kind of see it maybe jointly with council. This is kind of like, let's all talk about our future vision, if that's what you're kind of getting at.
So you hit on the point where I'm going. The town council has the opportunity to have a retreat, and I'm not saying we go that far. I'm just saying we meet offsite somewhere, and the 10 of us just get together. And as an example, I mean, one of the things I'd like to talk about is, let me take a step back. So much of what we do up here, we are downstream from what you are doing as a planning department. And I think there's some opportunity for us to become a little more proactive in coming up with, for example, some tools, like looking at, and I know you guys have this stuff, but looking at where the development's happening, kind of analyzing some of that and talking through it in preparation for these type of meetings. So I'm wondering if we can do that offsite as a group and it not be considered like an official meeting, My understanding is if we have a quorum, then
how I've done these before is it's just like how council, they just do the retreat, they announce it, it's a public meeting. So if the board was to have a meeting a night like that, we would just announce it. So it would be a meeting of the board, but then the agenda would have some items of discussion, and we can have that kind of back and forth.
I'm talking about a non-public
A
meeting.
non-public meeting?
Non-public meeting.
I don't believe that we could do that with the board
not?
in a
Okay.
non-public meeting. No.
Everything's,
Yeah.
everything's a matter of public.
Yeah, because this is all public record.
That's, okay.
We don't want to have any perception of decisions being
Understand.
made behind closed doors.
And
Yeah.
I'm extremely respectful of that. I
What is an option though is to have two members meet with me over coffee and we can talk about these things.
Okay.
As your time permits.
yeah, as long as it's, so I guess where I'm going with this is the qualification is the quorum. As long as we don't have a quorum, we can have
I'd say
discussions.
no more than, if there's 3 or more members, then we need to, because that quorum is 5. So if you got 3 out of 5, that's a majority
Okay,
vote.
understand.
Mm-hmm.
And then my second and last question is there anything that prevents us from attending neighborhood meetings?
No, nothing prevents you from attending as far as like the UDOG. But Abby did do some research for that, and we did some research about neighborhood meetings and called several other cities in the area. And the general consensus, I mean, there's over 10 cities, probably even more, and I've got that data, and I wanted to kind of think about that more. But just off the top of my head, not a lot of jurisdictions have their planning board attend the neighborhood meetings. And there's different reasons as to why. One of the reasons is just because it gives you that degree of separation. Typically, the neighborhood meeting is, well, it's going to be with the concept plan or a conditional rezoning, and they're looking to get that direct input from the citizens so that they can cook up something that can go to staff and then come eventually to the board. And it gives you that kind of protected separation. I've entertained the idea of having neighborhood meetings on our public meeting website because there was a jurisdiction that had a similar idea of noticing. I don't want to open that up just yet because we've just created our public meetings. We've got our public meetings website where we're noticing our evidentiary hearings, our public meetings from the planning board, and the public hearings. The timing of the neighborhood meeting is also not on town staff. It's at the applicant's discretion. So how they do that, now they'll send us a letter saying that we're having a meeting, but that letter, the timing of that letter is usually, it's less than, might be, well, it should be about 10 days. So the timing of when we get something, it's a little bit tight. So I tend to defer to the idea that neighborhood meetings be for the neighborhood. Now, if you happen to hear of one, you can go and check it out is the thing.
So that's where I'm going with this. As a condition of your process, you're requiring applicants to have a neighborhood meeting. So they have to advise you of when that is, correct?
So when we do they don't have to tell us when they're going to have it.
Okay.
When they submit the application, they'll let us know if they have the neighborhood meeting within six months or 60 days, one of the two, before they submit their application.
So I guess where I'm going with this, just to cut to the chase, is if you guys are notified that a neighborhood meeting is going to be happening for an upcoming, something that will be coming before us, would it be okay for us to be notified of that and just sit in the back of the room and attend? And we're hearing some comments from some of the people that are attending about neighborhood meetings and some negative comments. And I'm just wondering if that's a possibility for us to attend in a non-official capacity, sit in the back of the room, see how it goes and leave it at that. Is that possible or not?
I mean, I think anything is possible, right? I like to have that perspective.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, I think having a planning commissioner sit in the back room, the technical issue is just if you have more than 2 of you going, right? Having a formal capacity. And you all are officials. You're appointed by council, so it's hard to say.
I will say the
an official.
upside to that,
Yeah.
and I think it can be problematic if it looks like we're infiltrating, a public meeting. But I will say this, a few years ago, I was in the process, my organization, of building a funeral home in another part of the state, not in the Clayton area, but another part of the state. Not everybody's that excited, shockingly, to have a funeral home next door to where they live. And we had some of the town planning people that showed up at our public meeting where it was just an information session where the public could come in. I don't even know that it was an official public meeting, but we opened it up to the public. We advertised it and let people come in to see what our concept was, what we wanted to do. By the time we got to the town council and to the planning board, we had adjusted some of the things that we were doing based on input we got that night, where the neighbor said, I like this, but I don't like that. And we made adjustments before we ever got to the council and the planning board. But because there were planning board members that attended, it was obvious to them that we had listened to the public the night we had the public meeting, and that we had self-adjusted and not waited to be required to do something in order to get it passed. We heard the public, and we adjusted our game plan a little bit about what we wanted to do, because some of the things the public said was not a bad idea. We adjusted. I think that helped us in the process with the town, because it was painfully obvious we had made adjustments of our own accord. And I don't think the town would have known that particular town would have known that, had not somebody from the planning board and the city council been at that public meeting and seen that. Now, we could have said it in our presentation that we had a public meeting, here's the changes we made, but I think it had an impact because they did see that we of our own volition had done that. But we also have to be careful it doesn't look like we're overtaking a public meeting.
I mean, that's something we can discuss about. We've got some of the data from other towns, and just, I think my goal will be to make sure that if the question is, if it's done for one application, how do we standardize that? How do we make that as part of the process? And we don't have that. I haven't really thought much about that process right now. But also how that would work if we let the applicants know, by the way, we've invited the planning board and town council, and it's now a public meeting kind of thing. I'm not sure if that's a good idea.
That is not what I'm suggesting and asking, so, at all.
If I could just clarify, I think Conrad kind of touched on this earlier, is that, we definitely probably wouldn't advise that. It's not illegal. So I don't think, from a legal standpoint, like one of you attending would be a legal issue, but I don't think I would advise it as like a general practice now.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Did you mention earlier that there are going to be plans underway to revamp the comprehensive plan or to do an update?
Yeah, with town council's approval of the budget, we have a principal planner position that was approved. So we're looking to have that project initiated. So a comprehensive plan update, hopeful.
Great. And just to that point, I think as we've seen projects lately in the past year or so, I think it would be helpful. Things change quickly, and it is difficult for us to be going through the approval of the motion, and it's say inconsistent with the comprehensive growth plan, when generally speaking, if we know the character of that part of town, it makes sense. It does create a challenge, I think, both for the planning board and for town council when it gets to that point. But also Clayton's changing rapidly. And I even think some of the density calculations probably could be updated to, in some cases, be higher, and in some cases, perhaps lower. But just food for thought and moving forward, I think that's a wise decision and benefit all of us.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Certainly. Go right ahead.
Did I read correctly that the new legislation has ruled against the number of floors you can have on a building now, or the heights of buildings down? I think I read that.
I'm recalling some legislation about not being able to cap a 60-foot.
Cap.
Yeah, I think it's 60 foot.
Remove the cap restriction. Thought I did. And I know we've discussed that here in our town, so especially for Main Street. So I wanted to ask if you understood it the same way.
That's what I remember reading last, and how that status of that legislation. I know Rich is aware of these legislation changes as well. So our goal is to make sure that, to the UDO aligning with the state statutes, we're keeping up with these changes as they occur and get approved by the legislators.
I just needed the clarification because I thought I had read that and then I went back to look for it and couldn't find it.
Yeah.
So, all right, thank you.
Anyone else have anything, Conrad?
All right.
All right. Thank you, Conrad.
Thank you all very much.
Appreciate it very much.
Okay.
I will say that I think it's very helpful for us. I'm glad that Andrea is able to be at our meetings representing the town council usually, and I think that's helpful from the standpoint, and I know that's why she's there, but it's helpful that when we either vote thumbs up or thumbs down on our recommendation for something, it's not just a thumbs up or thumbs down. There's some color and flavor to how we arrived at that decision, and the council doesn't always have to agree with us. That's the beauty of the the system that we have. We don't have to agree with them. They don't have to agree with us. It's nice if we do, but it doesn't always work out that way. But I do appreciate the council being with us tonight and honoring us with their presence, and also all the members of the staff of the planning department. Very nice to sometimes put faces with names that we've seen, but we haven't met the folks yet, so that's great.
Mr. Chairman.
Got something else you'd like to say? Oh, go right ahead. We'll let you speak. It's not your meeting, but we'll let you speak.
I've been as quiet as I can possibly be. No, I just want to take 1 minute to say thank you to each and every one of you for the job that you do for the town of Clayton. A planning board is supposed to be made up of people with multiple perspectives. That's how we get the greatest results for the town that we all love. And you don't have to agree with my perspective. I don't have to agree with your perspective. But as long as we're sharing and our come from is authentic and what we truly feel to be is what's best for the town of Clayton, that's when we arrive with the right decisions that we arrive with. And I know that you could be anywhere you want to be. You could be at home with your families. You could be at a local bar having a cold beer right now. But you gave your time to the town of Clayton and for our citizens to make Clayton be the best that it can be. The town of Clayton is my hometown, and it's the greatest place I know. And it's because of people like you. Thank you for having us tonight. Thank you to my council members who are here. And if you want to say thank you, I don't mind if you come to the front and say thank you. But I just want you to know how much we appreciate the good work that you all do and our staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Appreciate it very much. Come on down.
I do
Please
want
give
to
us your
say
name
thank
and your
you.
address, please.
Andrea Archer, 406 Fayetteville Street. And I just did want to thank you formally for everyone to hear. I'm with you guys at almost all the meetings and just really appreciate the time each and every one of you put into it and the perspective. I sat up there for 4 years, so I know the sacrifice and the difficulty of the job. So really and truly thank you. And the mayor said it better, but there you go. You've heard it twice.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone this evening?
I want to say thank you.
Got one more person coming to speak, so save it, Mr. Hall. We'll let you talk in a minute.
No, I was just going to say thank you back to Andrea, because from the first night I was here for planning board, she was very open and accessible to everybody that's on the planning board. In my experiences, that's not always the case. So I appreciate that she takes the time to listen to all of us. And we have discussed many projects that got approved or didn't get approved or recommended. And we've been able to discuss our rationale and come to better understandings of each other as to why we might vote the way we do or make the decisions that we make. So thank you, Andrea.
She's outstanding. And I'd just like to thank all of you and just reiterate what's being said. And the other thing I want to share with you is that I watched these meetings. I might not be in the room for these meetings. So just know that a lot of us watch these meetings. We might not watch them that night, but we'll go back and watch to get prepared for a council meeting. So again, we do appreciate what you do, and we do pay attention to what you do, and your commitment is much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to touch on the question about color. As a florist, I think I have the answer to that. Those color palettes that you spoke about, they have the ability to increase the perceived value or to lessen the perceived value. So those color palettes that you referred to and those gray tones and all that, it can be beautiful farmhouse that has a modest cost, or it can be the New Yorker, which has the multi-million-dollar. But we're seeing a change in the trends with that. And developers are having to be super careful now with the restrictions that they place on a residential subdivision, because in the event that they use the word neutral color, that could include red. Name a color that doesn't go with red. Now, that doesn't mean Becky Flowers is going to want a whole bunch of houses out there that are red. She'll have a stroke. But that's the reason the color palettes are the way they are, that it's the ability for it to look town and country or to look extremely metropolitan.
Chair, I just want to say one other thing. My second meeting on planning board, we got the Gateway 42 presentation, and I got really mad that night by the presenter or the consultant that was presenting, because they said that we should give incentives to businesses to be located in Clayton along NC 42. And I said after the meeting, I actually walked up to Andrew after the meeting and I said, the incentive is you're in Clayton. That's the incentive.
All right. At this point, I will take a motion to adjourn if someone would like to make it.
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
Have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? All right, you got a second. I was about to say, I was worried. Y'all paused for this. All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Thank you.